What up, Street Beast fam, YouTube fans, and anybody else who stumbled across my channel? Shinigami here, aka Sensei Danny, and today I'm going to be doing my very first episode of Black Belt Thoughts. And today's topic is going to be just some misconceptions about martial arts within the martial arts communities, specifically the difference between the jiu-jitsu community and like the karate or striking community, especially more traditional schools. Um, some of you might know, just from watching my channel, I compete in training and compete in both karate and Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. I love doing MMA. It's why I started learning Jiu Jitsu. I am a first degree black belt in Kempo Shotokan Karate Do, and um, well, actually, Kempo Shotokan 360 because we mixed Grandmaster Andre Glenn's 360 combat into the Kempo Shotokan curriculum we already had. Also, I do Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. I've been doing that for a long time, off and on. I'm a blue belt with 3 stripes. Um, so I hear a lot of things from instructors on both sides and people that train in both, groups because of things they hear from their instructors and just generally people that are considered community leaders within the respective arts. And no disrespect to any of my teachers at all. This is just my personal perspective, having been on, swam in both pools. Um, so one thing I always hear a lot is, from the karate side of things is, well, jiu-jitsu is cool and all, but you don't want to end up on the ground in a street fight because what if there's like multiple attackers and da 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 da. And that is true. You don't want to be on the ground if there's multiple attackers, or you don't want to stay on the ground if there's multiple attackers. Sometimes you can't really, prevent yourself from being put on the ground, especially if you don't know how to do it. Statistics say something like 60 to 70% of fights end up in the ground, but 100% of fights start standing up. Brings me to the things I hear from the jiu-jitsu side, like, well, that stuff doesn't work. The UFC proved that jiu-jitsu does this and Muay Thai does that, and da da da. But speaking of the UFC, there's a lot of guys who are karate bases. You got Wonder Boy, you got Lyoto Machida, you got Raymond Daniels, you got just a plethora of guys training like traditional karate arts or like taekwondo or all kinds of stuff that do excellent in the UFC and stuff. So I don't think it's ever really been, even back in the day. I mean, Keith Hackney did some work with American Kempo. In fact, UFC 4, he at that point was the only person who had kept Hoist Gracie on his feet for more than a minute or two. So I mean, the thing that a lot of people have lost sight of is that there are different aspects to each art, and originally, if you go way back, each country who had an art, Okinawa, right? Karate was a complete art. It had grappling, standing up, grappling on the ground, submissions, every strike you can think of, all of it, right? The first known, as far as I can tell from my own research, uh, martial art in China was a grappling art. The first art in Okinawa was a grappling art. Japan's first art was jiu-jitsu. Granted, combat jiu-jitsu that the samurai, learned was taught with weapons and did include punches and kicks, just not a whole lot, simply for the fact that the whole reason for the art was to deal with an armored opponent, and that's why there's joint locks and stuff emphasized so much in the grappling arts from Japan, and those that have offshot from them, like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Um, even the Gracie family, if you ever look up their old challenge videos right here on YouTube, or the ones that are narrated, you don't hear Hickson or Horian or whoever's narrating go, uh, well, this is why the jiu-jitsu is the only art that works. No, they say, as you can see, the karate guy does not know what to do on the ground. Learn Gracie jiu-jitsu and filling the holes in your game. And that's really what it comes down to. Jiu-jitsu is very good to learn, even if you learn Kempo or Shotokan, Kyokushin, Goju-ryu, Shito-ryu, Uechi-ryu, Okinawa-te, Shorinji Kenpo, anything. Anything that is primarily focused on standing up, fighting, and even standing grappling is still lacking very specific, very important things you need to know to completely defend yourself entirely. Okay, like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, a lot of the play. I don't think I've trained any place that has taught weapon defense. Whereas my Kempo school, we emphasize weapon defense quite a bit. Realistic stuff too, and we also emphasize very, very importantly the fact that the best thing to do if it's possible is get out of there if somebody pulls out a weapon. You don't want to engage an armed opponent if you absolutely can avoid it, because it's dangerous, and even with good technique, you'll likely still at least get cut. Guns are a zero-sum game. You either get control of the weapon and do something to your opponent, your attacker, or you're toast. And then that's got range limitations, but that's for another video. Jiu-Jitsu teaches you how to not only avoid getting taken down, but how to get up off your back or off the ground if you do get taken down. And that's the important part that a lot of people don't understand in the karate community about Jiu-Jitsu. Okay, so the yin and yang symbol is all over the place in martial arts. I think a lot of people forget that means there's two sides to everything, or that there's more than one aspect of things, and Jiu-Jitsu is the other half of that yin yang. So all your Kempo ain't gonna work standing up. I mean, all your Kempo or your karate ain't gonna work if you're not standing up. There's only so much you can do on the ground if you don't know what you're doing. And yes, the other thing is, the other side of the thing is, a lot of the things I hear from the eye gouges and all that stuff, that doesn't work. Anybody can do that. You got to train for it. If you aren't trained to have that reaction or aim for that target, you're not going to do it. Just like anything else, right? If you don't know how to choke somebody out with a collar like you learn in Jiu-Jitsu, you're never going to choke somebody out with their collar. So, their jacket, whatever. So, your Kempo and all that is only going to get you so far if you're not standing up. And your Jiu-Jitsu is only going to get you so far if you're dealing with multiple attackers and you're on the ground. Now, that being said, there's still the same kind of principles apply to both arts. You still have to have situational awareness. You got to feel what's going on. It's not just one thing works better than the other. The best thing to do is to learn both, and that's something I've learned a lot. And they mesh well together, in my opinion. I've personally worked on blending them together for real world combat situations, not just MMA competition or sport aspect stuff. I can put an Uchimata on the end of almost any Kempo technique and go into an armbar or wrist lock or anything without going completely to the ground. And if I do have to go to the ground and do something to my opponent, I can do one or two things from the mount and get out and get back on my feet and deal with the next guy. That's what I practice a lot. On the other side, when I'm rolling in Jiu-Jitsu, I try to go and think about, okay, I'm in this position. I can't, obviously I'm in class. I can't strike my opponent or do anything nasty to him that isn't, part of the art while I'm in that setting. But I look at where these openings are to do things and combine concepts. So, back to the things like the eye gouge, right? In the street, an eye gouge is excellent. The first thing you want to do, and I found this out completely on accident because I accidentally eye gouged somebody one time in Jiu-Jitsu, but it was an accident. We went for the same collar grab at the same time, and he ducked under my hand, or tried to duck under my hand, and my thumb went in his eye. And little side note here, one thing your instructors never tell you when you eye gouge somebody, it's the most disgusting feeling thing in the world, and it makes you reel back if you don't know what you're doing. Now that I've had that experience, I'm not going to freak out next time, but So obviously, one of the most common things, one of the most effective things and important things you learn in jiu-jitsu is how to get off your back. Scissor sweep, right? From the guard, week one stuff. Like, first thing you should learn always is bridge escape from mount, scissor sweep from the guard, and a couple of submissions from both, the basic submissions from both those positions. Arm bar, collar choke, shoulder locks, the Americana and the Kimura. More self-defense oriented stuff like knee bars or whatever, but basic shit is always going to be the the bridge escape and the scissor sweep. And if you're dealing with a street attacker and somehow you end up on your back and you've got them in guard and you can't quite get them to make that space for you to get your shin across their chest to do that scissor sweep, thumb in the eye. Thumb in the eye will do it. Guaranteed. I mean, unless they're really on PCP or something, but even then, I don't even know if that's gonna dull that sensation enough to make them not at least pull back. So, key thing here is the reality of martial arts is that you can't necessarily just believe something because you're told that that's the case. And there's a lot of cult mentality in a lot of martial arts schools, and I don't really have it in mind at all. I'm lucky about that. I've avoided that sort of situation. But you get a lot of schools that have these people who are trained to whatever their instructor says is the absolute law of martial arts as a whole. Because a lot of people put trust in their instructors, and their don't, without realizing that their instructors, just because they have a black belt in one art, are not a master of all arts. They are not knowledgeable about all things. They're knowledgeable about the art that they take. And I believe the karate nerd Jesse Enkamp has touched on that. Black belt really only matters in your own dojo, not even in your own style so much necessarily as just your own dojo. But first and foremost, simply because what gets taught in your school, even in your art, might be slightly different than how it's taught in another school. So always keep that in mind too. But like I said, the biggest thing here is these misconceptions that jiu-jitsu doesn't work against multiple attackers, and karate doesn't work if you take them to the ground and da da da. A real world situation, karate's cool for whatever. No, they both work. If you learn practical karate and you learn it in a setting that applies it in pressure situations within reasonable safety limits, of course, it's gonna work. Okay, and the same thing with jiu-jitsu. Jiu-jitsu, while they don't always emphasize dealing with multiple attackers, and a lot of places don't deal with real world situations and want to stick with sport rules and what's allowed in IBJJF, like not teaching white belts leg locks beyond ankle locks and stuff like that. The reality is it is a self-defense art that's very useful, very practical, and even against multiple attackers, there are things in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu that you can use. It's not all just tie-ups and things. It's how to escape holds and how to get off your back. So I think the biggest takeaway here to keep in mind is that, McDojos and con artists notwithstanding, the list of martial arts that we're pretty familiar with off top of our heads, if you were to hear martial art or someone I were to ask you start listing them off, most of the time those are going to be effective arts. You just have to put the time in, because what you put in is what you get out. And you can't just rely on one thing ever. One art is not necessarily going to be the be all end all ever. Everything has holes. Everything has gotten specialized to a point where it's going to have holes, and there's just no getting around that at all. But if you learn one art and focus on the principles of the art and the principles of the dynamics of how these arts work and go do something like jiu-jitsu, you're going to have an easier time crossing over if you don't think of it as something completely separate and think about the principles that they're trying to apply, not how they apply them per se. You'll pick up how they apply them faster. So, yeah, I mean that's about the biggest thing for me when it comes to that stuff is that jujitsu is better or karate is better or jujitsu is cool for sport but it doesn't work on the street, or karate's cool for this and that and kata but it doesn't work on the street. That's not the real truth at all. It's they both work but they both have limitations and holes because of the way they're taught. And if you really want to make things practical, you learn both. Or on top of learning both, you go really delve into the way things used to be taught. That's one of the things I like about Jesse Enkamp, is he really goes into the bunkai, the original bunkai, and realistic bunkai for Shotokan katas and Okinawan katas in general, because most of them are the same. Shotokan came from Okinawa just as much as the other Okinawan arts like Goju-ryu, Uechi-ryu, Shito-ryu, Isshin-ryu. All of that stuff came from the Ryukyu Islands, Okinawa, originally. And originally they were all complete arts. It wasn't until Gishin Funakoshi took it to Japan and the Japanese standardized it to be taught to large groups that it became, and to separate it from judo and jiu-jitsu, that it became primarily a punching and kicking art, and the katas became, start where they start sort of situations. But there's 100 videos about that. I don't need to get into that right now. My biggest thing is just, like I said, the misconceptions I hear from both sides, and the things that if people would cross train more, especially these instructors would cross train more, would go away, and probably wouldn't get hurt again. Because honestly, it's just, it's not necessarily a good idea to say things like that, because it's going to limit what your students learn, or what you as a student learn if you've heard that and take it to heart. There's always something useful to be gained from something or the other. And other misconceptions too, Muay Thai, right? Well, it's more effective than karate because they do this and this and this, elbows and knees. Okay, again, that's a perception based on what's allowed in the sport versus what's actually taught for self-defense and practicality. And while it might be a little different because of the way, again, principles are applied, Kempo, Shotokan, there's elbows, there's knees, there's clinch work, there's takedowns. Even Muay Thai has takedowns and hip tosses. It's because the body works a certain way. Things that work are going to work against a human body from another human body if they're trained enough, period. So, it's the perception based on what people see in certain aspects like sport tournaments and things like that, versus the reality of the street defense combative side of things. And even jiu-jitsu looks different and starts to resemble karate a little more when you start watching like the old Gracie combatives videos, the Gracie self-defense videos, where there are punches and kicks and things included, and it's not just strictly grappling. It's just, once they get to the ground, there's more emphasis on ground attacks, submission attacks, chokes, joint locks, things that are more likely to end a fight than just trying to sit there and beat your opponent up. But a chop to the neck is going to knock somebody out just as quickly as snapping somebody's arm is probably going to get them to stop fighting, or trying to hurt you. So that's where we are. That's where it is. That's the state of martial arts today, and I wish it wasn't. And hopefully this video helps some of you guys have a different perspective, or open your perspective and start trying different things. Even Aikido. as generally useless as it is for the most part, because it was never meant to be practical, still has things that are good demonstration of principle, and certain things that will work if you pick them up and then pressure test them and incorporate them with your karate or your jiu-jitsu or your hapkido or your taekwondo or your muay thai, simply because, again, principle, it works if you realize the principle behind it and work on making it practical. Not everything in aikido is great. A lot of it, obviously, because again, it's not supposed to be practical, and a lot of it relies on strictly compliant training partners and pretty much zero pressure testing at all. Um, the way it's taught doesn't work. But if you take some of it, like some of it's even in the 360 system, because it works when you pressure test it, apply it, and understand the principle behind it and why it works. Same thing with jiu-jitsu. You learn it's actually, there's a lot of aiki in jiu-jitsu. Aiki being the principle of our harmonious energy or harmonious movement, and that applies when you're dealing with setting up submissions, especially as you start getting higher in the ranks. When you start dealing with attacking one thing, or to set up something else, or you feel something open up when your opponent is defending a submission, like certain ways to get the armbar from the mount. If you pin their hand down and they try to lift it or whatever, or reach across to try to defend, you can put your pressure up behind their arm, keep them trapped there, and go for the armbar. There's aiki in that. There's aiki in pretty much every takedown you set up that isn't a double or a single, because you're learning how to bait your opponent into giving up their balance for a specific throw or foot sweep or whatever. So again, like I said, there's always something useful in just about every art that's legitimate art, and even some that aren't. Like I said, Aikido. Um, but again, it comes down to the fact that you have to learn. Stick with your base art for a while, get deep into it, and then once you get to a certain point, branch out into something that isn't in the same style of art. Okay, so start jiu-jitsu and then go do American Kempo or Jeet Kune Do or Muay Thai, Shotokan, Kyokushin, something like that. And that's the other thing too. There should be a line. Somebody else said this once, and I agree with it. There should be a direct line between grappling and striking arts, and if you can't get to one from the other, you're doing something wrong. And that's okay. We should make mistakes because that's how we learn. If we don't do anything wrong, we don't learn, right? It doesn't give us opportunities to expand our knowledge in other ways. We're just copying exactly what we're shown. So make those mistakes, cross train, but wait a little bit. Wait a couple of years before you cross train, because another thing people don't understand is muscle memory is the biggest part of martial arts, and if you start cross training in a different art too early, you're not going to get muscle memory proficiently in one or the other, because you're going to confuse your body. I didn't start doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu or MMA type stuff until I was a blue belt in karate. Um, Now that was 2 3 years in. So same thing with jiu-jitsu. I would at least get your blue belt before you go learn the striking art. Unless you were really intent on MMA, but if you really want to focus more on like practical street combat, street defense, a couple of years of jiu-jitsu, go train a striking art. Um, Arts I recommend personally would be obviously my own art, Kempo, American Kempo primarily. Jeet Kune Do is also good. even though it's more intended to be an augmentation. Wing Chun has good hand techniques in it, but again, anyone who knows about Jeet Kune Do knows Bruce Lee designed that because Wing Chun lacked a lot of footwork. So that's kind of also more of an augmentation. Muay Thai is demonstrably great. Muay Baran, any of those Lethway, get them headbutts in there. Headbutts work. Uh, I also recommend, Salat is more of an exotic, lesser known art, but I've seen some pretty good stuff come out of it. Good techniques in it. As far as grappling goes, if you're a striker base, I recommend first and foremost Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. But again, it's not the be all end all. Japanese Jiu Jitsu, if you find like combat Jiu Jitsu, something more along the lines of what the samurai did, something that's going to teach you groundwork, weapons, striking on the ground and standing up, that's excellent. Um, Small circle is good too, but that's not ground focused. It's you need to learn how to get off the ground, work on the ground, control someone on the ground. It's very important. But yeah, that's the video for today, guys. I think I've rambled on enough and probably repeated myself a couple of times. So that was it. Black Belt Thoughts #1. Don't forget to like, subscribe, click that notification bell so you get all the updates on the video and help keep me in the algorithm. Make sure you check out my Teespring store, buy some merch to support me, and big shout out to Scarface from Street Beast, founder of Street Beast, for giving everybody the opportunity to fight, even if they, don't have. Just because sometimes people don't have the means to pay to deal with the amateur organizations or professional organizations in their states. Shout out to him for the opportunity that I had to go fight in the yard and to continue to go fight in the yard, because without him, I wouldn't have the exposure that I have. And get well soon. He's in the hospital with pneumonia. He says he's recovering well. The doctor says he's recovering well, but gotta repeat it, bro. Gotta put that energy out there. Get better, Scarface. We need you, man. You're awesome, and you got to beat this. Shout out again to my boy Cougar Jackson. Check out his channel, Reaction Fight Club. Heart in the Fight. Check out not just my interview on their channel, but all the other interviews on their channel. Big shout out to those guys, Daniel and Omar. Street Beast fam. We all got to support each other, right? So I shout them out, help lift them up. They've helped give me exposure too. Shout out to Yardy and a few other guys whose channels I can't think of the name of off the top of my head, who have reacted to my fights. Jen's Pulver, thank you too. I don't even know if you watch my channel, but I know Bushido Zed has posted pictures of you reacting to my first two Street Beast fights. So thank you for that. That's more exposure. And thank you to everybody who's already subscribed. Spread my channel around. Thank you for all the help, and I will see you guys next week. Shinigami out.